book is Gary Hedges. Gary, last time I think I saw Gary in the flesh was in Ainsdale on a beautiful day at the Geno Blitz in Ainsdale. Gary's a member of the curatorial team at World Museum, Liverpool, and he's based in the entomology department. He manages an externally funded invertebrate recording and conservation initiative. It's known as the Tanyptera Project, which refers to a very small group of species, taxed with a very small group of species in England, but the project covers a wide range of entomological species across Lancashire and Cheshire region, northwest England. I'm going to hand over straight to Gary, because that means I will be keeping to time, and that's a miracle. Gary.
Thank you very much, Simon. So I'm going to be, again, going a bit off theme, actually completely off theme, really, with this, because it was originally this conference would have been at World Museum in Liverpool. And so I'm very thankful for the platform to just speak about the project today. The Tanyptera Project was originally a 5-year project, now 7.5 years until October 2024, externally funded by the Tanyptera Trust and guided by a steering group of actual entomologists, including Phil Brighton, patron of the Tanyptera Trust, Steve Judd, Ian Wallace and Steve Garland, some familiar names in UK biological recording. The project was set up to promote the study and conservation of insects and other invertebrates in the Lancashire and Cheshire region of northwest England. Leanna Dixon and myself are employed by National Museums Liverpool to work on the project, and in a usual year we reside in the entomology department at World Museum. So we don't actually do practical invertebrate conservation work or captive breeding or anything like that, but the project does have a big focus on improving understanding through recording, which of course lends itself to better invertebrate conservation decisions and awareness. A big part of that is by facilitating invertebrate recorders. So we've loaned dozens of books and microscopes. We've heavily invested in upgrading facilities that recorders can use, high quality imaging equipment, microscopes, DNA barcoding equipment, hundreds of library books, even chairs. We've digitized thousands of pages of old regional journals and card indexes. These have been really useful, in the past year, given the lack of access to hard copy in the museums during the pandemic. We run lots of courses. I'll tell you more about that in a minute. We have a grant scheme that supports individual recorders and groups. And perhaps just a call out to Karen from the last talk, perhaps we can have a chat about maybe how we can perhaps improve the criteria for that grant scheme. And the grant scheme also includes sponsoring invertebrate publications. So just a couple of recent ones, the hoverflies of Saddleworth and the bees, wasps and ants of Lancashire that we've supported. And as this is a national conference, I think it's worth mentioning that the grant scheme criteria also does support national society field trips to the region, as helping with the costs of accommodation and access to facilities. So we really want you all to come to the northwest and Lancashire and Cheshire region and do recording. Our recording days program helps bring recorders together and help them to get to new sites, particularly private areas. And we haven't, I'm just thinking of urban recording on the recording day front, and we might have done about 30 different sites, but I think only one of them that I think of was actually urban, so we've not been very good at that. We work with recording groups. For example, we recently joined forces with Lancashire Moth Group to create an online atlas. We also promote invertebrate conservation and research. We have commissioned several surveys which seek to improve our understanding of threatened species in the region. I'll give you an example of one of those in a minute, as well as assemblage, habitat and site surveys. And we've got a lot going on this year because of several postponements to surveys last year. We are very keen on data sharing and making information more accessible. Our survey reports go online, all of our recording day data goes on Pantheon, as well as, of course, the Land Owners in Natural England, where they're a SSI. So, of course, before the pandemic, we were doing all of our training stuff face-to-face. So we've had 46 days of face-to-face training before the pandemic, covering a big range of groups for ID, but also wider topics such as curation, field techniques, and recording software. Of course, all that changed, but now we've now done 33 free webinars since the 14th of May 2020. They've been presented by national and regional experts, which we're very grateful to. And our format for those is quite indulgent, really, because we sort of exhaust the audience of questions at the end of the talk, and probably we exhaust the speaker too, because there's no sort of end time. We just keep going until there's no more questions. So they've been up to 2.5 hours long, and it doesn't really matter, because we're not going to be kicked out of the village hall or whatever. People can just go straight to bed afterwards. And we found a big increase in the number of people actually engaged with the project as a result of this. We have a very strong Northwest contingent at these, but we've been having people joining from all over the world, particularly the United States and Europe. And although a lot of the talks have been on UK identification, there's a lot of stuff on on ecology as well, which is obviously very transferable. And those that graph there is really just showing the individual engagements, those are views on YouTube, but really in terms of the actual hours of content or training, they're actually those face-to-face, the actual webinars and the recordings are actually quite equal in the number of hours at the moment, which is about somewhere in the region of 3,000 hours for each. So yeah, the webinar recordings go on YouTube, and they're actually helping to fill a void in the vast offering that the YouTube platform has, because you can learn virtually anything on YouTube. How to tile a bathroom, through to how to teach a cat to high five, or how to balance 2 forks and a toothpick. Very useful things like that. But there's very little on how to identify UK invertebrates. When we've been looking before we've been sort of booking these workshops, there's been nothing on identifying woodlice or stoneflies or sawflies, and there's a vast cavern of nothing where there could be. And so we now have 36 videos on the channel, and about 50 hours of content, and these, because we host some of the Lancashire and Cheshire Entomological Society talks, there's some extra things on there. The hoverfly recording scheme also provided a talk, and there's also a short clip on a very effective sieving technique by Clive Washington, and we're very thankful for those contributions. I just wanted to highlight one of the webinar series we did, because we've had lots of amazing webinars, but most recently in April, Paul Richard basically talked you through the identification of all 33 British harvestman species and some other European species that haven't even been found yet in this country. And there's about 4.5 hours of tuition there, and then going up to about six hours, I think, of recordings or more with the discussion sessions, which are also very informative, and Paul gives very comprehensive answers. And I think you will you'll find it basically equates to a field guide, or even better than that. And I think some of these recordings will really be almost a standard reference for years to come. And I don't want to teach grandmothers to suck eggs or anything. I know lots of people, almost everyone's probably very familiar with YouTube, but I just wanted to mention on time stamps, because many of the videos include quite detailed identification tips for individual species. So we've started to timestamp sections or slides from certain talks, so you can go straight to an individual species if you don't have time to watch the whole thing. And this is just showing the sawfly presentation that Andrew Halstead gave, and there's quite a few sawflies that are easily identified, and you can just go straight to that species, and you get some really useful tips there. And going forward, we're planning to sort of slow down with the webinars. We've been doing them every week, and as we go through the summer and the field season, but then we want to reintroduce the full day workshops with microscopes at the museum, hopefully in the autumn, and we hope that this will, with the webinars and these recordings, will actually inspire more people to. This will, gives them an introduction, gives them a start to actually attend more full day and more involved workshops, rather than in any way replace them. So now I just wanted to give an example of one of the commission surveys. This survey on Amoebius brevis, the Ainsdale dung beetle. I'm not sure if I'm giving that a common name or whether it already had one actually. But this was the first species survey we commissioned back in 2017, and this particular beetle likes old dung on sand dunes in this country. When I started at the project in 2017, there was a budget for getting survey work done, and part of that could include work on threatened species. And I'm not from Lancashire or Cheshire, and I really had no idea about what occurred here, etc. So it was there was a starting point of where to prioritise. So I got hold of lots of data from the local record centres, which I'm very grateful for, some national schemes, the NBN Atlas, and checked those records against Natural England and National Resources Wales Commission national status reviews using the JNCC master list to see what threatened species we had. And these have been incredibly important to the project. And I just wanted to mention really the ability for any national expert to undertake a review like this. They have to have an enormous amount of data, over many decades or longer. And so without that, we wouldn't be able to prioritize, because they wouldn't have these statuses. And this particular beetle, Amoebius brevis, flagged up as critically endangered, possibly extinct. That's because we know that it's only being recorded with confirmed records from Ainsdale in Lancashire, well, Merseyside, over that 100 and whatever year period, even though there's been, huge amount of dung beetle recording, it's only turned up there, and that's why we know that it's so restricted. So critically endangered, possibly extinct. So clearly red flag there is one to look further at. And we were able to sort of mop up other threatened species that slipped through the net by local and national experts, and then go further into what data there is for this species. And it was last seen in 1996, despite recent searches. And despite the huge effort that the landowners put into conservation management, the landowners didn't know anything about this beetle or the existence on their land. And I've actually found this to be the case for basically every threatened species in the project that we've asked permission to survey for, they don't know what threatened invertebrates are on their land. And I think this highlights a problem within honeypots in terms of landowner and manager awareness of threatened invertebrate species. So with this information that hadn't been found since 1996 in this country, we got on to commissioning a survey to national experts, Kerry Watkins and Darren Mann. And this survey doubled up with another threatened species on the dunes. And of course, they both record all the scarabs that they find. So it's much more than just a single species survey. And they sieved a lot of dung and covered a lot of ground, and they eventually found 7 specimens on rabbit dung, but at very low densities. But this was really amazing news because you know, it will possibly extinct. Well, it's not extinct. It's hanging on. So Darren and Kerry wrote up their report and gave recommendations, and the main thrust of that about reintroducing summer grazing to cover the beetles breeding season instead of just the winter grazing. So we returned last year to find some cows have been left out in the open dunes. This was due to the pandemic, and an area where the beetle wasn't found in 2017, and they were absolutely thriving. There was probably the highest count ever of the beetle in a short time, something like 82, I think it was. And now Natural England have written Amosius brevis into their new management plan that they've just published, and this really helps it stay on the agenda and keep that awareness. In cases of staff turnover, etc. And they are now restarting summer grazing on the open dunes, which should really benefit and hopefully safeguard the species in this country. And of course, there are competing conservation needs. You know, there's concern over rare plants and of course natterjack toes and things. So it's all very much a balancing act. And I'm not an advocate for completely single species conservation on a site, but this is very managed in a way that should protect the other interests. And actually having dung throughout the summer will benefit a lot of other species. And I know Darren lists there's a list of dung beetles that have gone extinct from the Sefton coast, from the sand dunes, because of the lack of summer grazing in the past. So this should really benefit not only beetles but other things associated with dung. And just another good positive outcome from this survey is that we realised that the Sefton Coast sand dunes were not on the HECTAD mapping for bug life's important invertebrate areas project, and the fact that Amosius brevis was a category A species in terms of bug life's review. And I think Tom Thompson gave a talk about the project in the October NFBR conference, which I think is online, so you can go and look more about that excellent project that Bug Life have been doing. But because Amosius brevis is a category A, critically endangered, it gives automatic qualification for an important invertebrate area. So we are able to provide Darren Kerry's report to them with new records, and much to the Bug Life's credit, they very quickly made Ainsdale sand dunes NNR an important invertebrate area, so classified, which we're very grateful for. And just quickly going back to that new management plan of Natural England's, we've also helped influence putting other threatened invertebrates on that management plan as well. And here's one example of another species that we've surveyed for and found after more than 20 years since previous records. This is Bigoas lutosus, an aquatic weevil that is on the sand dunes, is completely reliant on Potamogeton gramineus, which occurs in 10 of the slacks we found out from the survey, out of about 350 slacks. So it occurs maybe about 3% or 3.5% of the slacks, and the beetle only occurs in 3 of those, so about 1% of the slacks. And this beetle has actually only been found in 7 ponds in the UK since World War II. So, and 3 of those being on the Sefton coast. So it is a very rare thing. And this you're looking at here is one of the slacks where it was found, and this has been earmarked for completely. It's a mature slack that, and so it's unsuitable for natterjack toes anymore. And it was one that was being earmarked to scrape out completely, to create and make it suitable for natterjacks again. But through finding out that this beetle is there, they're not going to do that anymore. And really, the management for this particular species is just about leaving the scrapes alone, or the slacks alone, where the food plant occurs, or where the beetle occurs. And there's not many of those, and I think it's often as simple as that with management of some threatened invertebrates. It's just that having that awareness of where they are through recording, you just know where to leave it alone. You're armed with that knowledge, and if you don't have biological recording, you're really in the dark about the decisions that you make and what other things you could affect. Another thing we've really just started on, and we just got going as the pandemic took hold, was DNA barcoding. So just before the first lockdown, we had a 2-part workshop where we actually had volunteer biological recorders coming in and going through the process of preparing specimens, doing the PCR work, and then getting the sequencing back, and then editing the sequences and putting them on bold, and really sort of trying to empower actual recorders with understanding how it works, and able to actually come into the museum and do DNA barcoding. But obviously that didn't get very far. And in last summer, we've sort of added to that with having a webinar, and now with the recording on YouTube now on an introduction to DNA barcoding for species identification. And we also, in December, we wanted to try and keep a bit of momentum going with this. So we had a free DNA barcoding offer where local recorders could give us 3 specimens, not any specimens, something that would try and solve a problem or contribute to a database. So even out of just barcoding a few specimens for recorders, we've added new species to the whole sort of global bold database. It's highlighted an issue with one of the DIPTRA keys, the new county records, and even the status of a moth in the region now has question marks over it. And that's just really just trying to get started, and all that has sort of gone into the bold database. So we really want to get back to doing much more on DNA barcoding going forward, and getting recorders involved with that. And then, because this conference was going to be in World Museum, and I hope it is someday soon, I wanted to mention about just what they've been doing very recently, and particularly in the pandemic period. World Museum Natural Sciences now has a data sharing policy with intent to contribute data to the big depositories and make it as open as possible. And they now have 7 data sets. And
rush you.
Sorry, I'm okay. Sorry, I'm right at the end.
Okay.
There's now 7 data sets on the NBN, and the curatorial staff are working on more bite-sized chunks all the time. And we just like to thank the NBN for allowing non-UK taxa and sending that straight off to GBIF for us. In particular, Sophia has been extremely helpful in facilitating this. And yeah, we have a website, a newsletter, social media, and all that stuff, and that's it. And there's far too many people and organisations to thank for being involved and helping with the project. And we're extremely grateful, of course, to the Tanyptera Trust for funding the whole thing, and particular Phil Brighton, the steering group, and the fantastic Leanna Dixon, my colleague on the project. Thank you very much, and sorry for overdoing it a bit.
I'm very sorry for butting in on you then, Gary, and ruining your flow. But I'm under strict instructions.